Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to my headshot photography podcast. Today I'm super excited because my guest is amazing photographer, also educator, Eli Infante. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you for saying yes. We've been kind of going back and forth to make this work. I know you're a super busy guy, and yeah, I really appreciated your time because I have a lot of questions to you about your photography because we've talked a little bit before, and as I said, I'm really inspired by what you do. Your photography is outstanding and
Thank
really
you.
amazing. As I said, I've been following your work. I try to learn from you as well because you've been sharing all your tips and tricks, and you're really I have to say, open to sharing your knowledge because it
Yes.
seems like this is something that not too many photographers want to do these days. And as soon as they will figure something out, they will, okay, this is mine. Nobody's going to even touch this. But you are on the actually on the other team that you sharing, you are helping others. So that's what actually also draws me to those type of people because we make this industry better and then we help other photographers to grow. So thank you so much for joining. And I'm going to start with like a really simple question. If you could just tell me a little bit about yourself and how did you get into photography? Like what makes you like, okay, I want to be a photographer. I know for some people is a process that takes time switching from, kind of having a camera and deciding, okay, I want to be a pro. I want to dedicate it, pretty much my life into this because that's the kind of only way to be successful in this department. This is actually well, it's my opinion, but I think you have to put a lot of work and a lot of years to
Mhm.
see some results. Yeah, but tell me a little bit your story. How did you get into photography? What's your background? And yeah, and also one more question I want to ask you. Like with that, why did you choose
Mhm.
portrait photography? Like why this genre of photography?
Got you. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much, Rafa, for having me on the podcast. Super excited to be here. You've been a huge inspiration for me, man. Your headshots are like stunning, man.
Thank you.
I need to learn from you. I know we were talking about it before, but after this, we need to talk because like your
Yes.
headshots are amazing. But
Thank you.
going back to how I got into photography, I'm gonna do like a quick little kind of description. Basically, my senior year in high school, I took a multimedia class where I learned Photoshop, video editing, and that's what I first started with Photoshop. It was
Okay.
because in my senior year, my teacher, Mr. Jet, really inspired me, and I got really into Photoshop. So my early stages was me just photographing a bunch of textures, anything around my house, just photographing it, photo manipulation, just
Hmm.
going bonkers with everything. My background is graphic design. So I
Okay.
went to school for graphic design. And so there's a lot of similarities between photography and graphic design
Mhm.
when it comes to composition. And so my background is graphic design. And then when I got hired as a teacher,
Oh
because I'm a
wow.
full-time teacher, I teach photography and I teach video in high school. I've been doing that for the past 11 years. So when I got hired in 2011, one of the classes that I was going to be teaching was photography. I was teaching graphic design and video. And when I got hired, I got asked to photograph the basketball teams, the faculty, and students.
Hmm.
So I soon had to start learning how to do off camera flash. I was doing natural light, and I started off with alien bees, had no clue what I
Okay.
was doing. I
Well, like
started off
most
with
of
screen
us.
lights. And then, but 10 years ago, there was no resources like YouTube.
No.
Everything was, like you said, everything was hidden. Like nobody was
Yeah.
sharing stuff. I think now it's so much easier to learn off camera flash and photography, but
Yeah, it was
so
mystery for most of us.
yes, it was, and you had to learn from these books. And for me, when it comes to learning, like off-camera flash books was so much of a struggle compared to what it is
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
So anyway, so I started photographing 2011, started getting into portraits, started getting addicted to it, and it wasn't until like 2016, 2015 is when I started to pursue more of the portrait photography, doing my own style, getting into high-speed sync, off-camera flash, and so it kind of just streamlined from there.
Hmm.
And even now, I'm really concentrating in the studio. I have a bunch of work. I've been so busy that I'm like 5 shoots behind. I have a lot of awesome studio stuff that I haven't shared yet.
Okay.
So I'm slowly transitioning into the studio now. So kind of getting a nice blend between off-camera flash outdoors, but now slowly going into the studio.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Well, you guys have a nice weather there, right? So that's also kind
Yeah.
of bonus because I have in Calgary we have pretty much 8 months of winter. So that's why I have to shift my headshot photography into like indoors because there's no way I could
Yes.
shoot where it's like -40 Celsius outside because it's not pleasant. Your body is just dying without minutes. So yeah, but that's what interesting what you have said because most I think maybe not most, but a lot of photographers starts with photography and they kind of get into Photoshop. That was my at least experience,
Mhm.
and it was a huge struggle. Like for me, Photoshop and all this stuff. Well, now I think it's better, but the beginning was extremely like lighting. I think you're just getting into something which is completely like dark room and you have no idea where to start. So, having
Yes.
said that, and that's going to be my following question. You kind of partially answered this whole thing, but how your photography evolved over the years? Like, what was the biggest change you've seen over the years, and how you can, like, say, compare what you were doing? I don't know, because you seem like you have many, many years under the belt. What is the biggest change you've seen over the years? Is the gear? Is the lighting? Is the posing? Is just general everything? How this whole thing evolved in your case?
That's a fantastic question because you look at my work 2 or 3 years from now, I was kind of stuck in this whole phase or this mindset of I'm gonna do high speed sync, I'm gonna go outdoors, I'm gonna blur out the background, I'm gonna look for a dramatic sky, expose for that sky, and just add the off camera flash.
Hmm.
And I soon realized that yes, I love that look, and I'm always gonna do that, but I always felt like okay, what else is there? There has to be more out there than just doing the same thing over and over again. Because for me, I like to challenge myself, even though it can be very, very uncomfortable because you get very comfortable with maybe a certain look that you have. And maybe
Hmm.
you're afraid of trying something different because I think we can all relate to this when you first start, photographing, you kind of create a certain look that you like.
Hmm.
Oh, sorry, I'm frozen on the screen there. I wasn't sure
Yes.
but it's okay. Don't worry. But basically, I found that going into the studio completely changed the way I approached my work. I thought I was like, oh man, I know off camera flash so well. But once I got in the studio, man, I look at my early stages of when I was in the studio, I had no idea what I was doing. The studio is so different because your styling, your makeup, your hair, your background, everything matters. But when you're outdoors, you can find a pretty location, use off camera flash. That's great. But in the studio, it's had to really challenge my brain. And I had to get really comfortable
Hmm.
starting as a beginner all over again and being okay to post work that maybe wasn't up to my standard. And I had this conversation with Jay Kicks, who's
Hmm.
one of my favorite photographers, does color gels. And he told me something that really opened up my eyes. And he said, my grandma
Hmm.
could take a great picture with soft light.
Hmm.
And he said, find a photographer that can use hard light, and that's going to really show you their skill set. So lately, I've been working also with hard light. So
Hmm.
me, at the beginning, I was always just soft light, soft light, soft light. But now that I'm getting into hard light, it's like, man, my brain is confused. It's really like trying to figure out what's going on here. Like the way I used to think was hard light was a bad thing, and slowly, my brain, after shooting with it for about 2 months, I'm starting to walk around now and I start to see little pockets of beautiful hard light now. And opposed to looking for the shade all the time, now I'm looking at hard light. So it's just kind of training your brain of looking at things a lot differently. So,
Hmm.
yeah, man.
So you're still frozen here. Let me see.
I'm gonna stop video and I'm gonna begin it
Okay,
again,
sure.
and it should fix. There we go.
There you go. Perfect. You know what? Everything which you have said, it's. I think we all go through similar processes, right? Because my background, and I don't want to jump into this, but I was shooting weddings,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought I got really good at it at some point. But then when I switched into portraits and headshots, as you said, like it's just a completely different kind of completely different game. And I was
Mm-hmm.
completely like I just had no idea about photography at all. Like I had to start from the scratch. I have to learn
Exactly.
lighting and
Mm-hmm.
all this stuff. But I think
Mm-hmm.
it's also interesting that people think like, oh, if you're good at certain genre of photography, you must be good at everything, right? But that's not
Oh yeah.
true. It's
Mhm.
completely different story, and I think like you need to really push yourself and challenge yourself, and then trying things which you never have tried before. And I think this is something where
Absolutely.
people get comfortable. That's the worst thing for photographer,
that,
right?
that that's exactly what I was going to say. Like you get comfortable with a certain look, and you don't want to branch out because then you become a beginner all over again. And nobody
Absolutely.
wants to feel like a beginner. Nobody wants to put in
Yes.
that hard work of learning something like, hey, I want to learn hard light,
Yeah.
or hey, I want to learn color gels. Like that's another thing that I've been incorporating a lot in my work is color gels, and it's this long process. And I think right now everybody just wants to learn everything quick, and
Yes.
there's a process to you have to make mistakes, you have to have some failures. You wouldn't believe that how many shoots that I've set up that have been complete failures, but because I went out there and I failed, it's engraved in my brain of, okay, never do that again, this is why it didn't work. So now when I go into the next shoot, I already know this formula and these steps of what's going to work. So
Perfect. So let's talk gear. I,
mhm,
like everyone who knows, and I think when you reach certain level, I'm not saying the gear is not important, because I
mhm.
I, I know people always
Oh.
kind of tell me that I'm kind of against new gear. I like to have stuff which are kind of I feel comfortable with. I'm not really kind of
Mhm.
this geek who is trying to, get hands on everything which is coming out. I like to kind of take a little bit of pause and wait. But so tell me a little bit about your gear. What's your, favorite, I would say, what is your favorite equipment? What's kind of makes your style of photography? Like, what would be the one thing which, in your opinion, is just like, okay, this is one piece of equipment which really kind of helps me to kind of create my style of photography?
So it would have to be any 35 millimeter prime lens.
Okay.
Specifically, if you want a specific 35 millimeter 1.2, I love being able to show off the location, but also
Mm-hmm.
just get that subtle blur. That's for my off camera flash work outdoors. And then if you're looking at lighting, my favorite light is the Westcott FJ400. It's
Okay.
the do it all strobe that I love using. And then using the Sony A7 III if I'm outdoors. If I'm shooting in the studio, love, 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 love my Canon R5
Mm-hmm.
with the 24 to 105 lens f4. Oh man, that lens is beautiful. I think I'm going to make a video about it. Being
Okay.
able to just zoom in and zoom out, it's fantastic. And then I love tethering. I have the Cam
Mm-hmm.
Ranger. I love tethering to my iPad,
Okay.
and I love that when I'm in the studio. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay, so let's kind of switch the gears a little bit, and I want to talk about a little bit about your experiences with photography. So, could you share with us like a story which kind of changed your life, but is also related to photography? It's anything happened over the last, I don't know, decade, shooting or doing any projects which really had a huge impact on your life, had an impact on like the way you think, just kind of change your life a little bit.
I would say that when I was in college, I was taking a film photography class,
Mm-hmm.
and I was working at a restaurant, Texas Roadhouse. And at that time, I wasn't making a lot of money. I barely had enough money to pay for my car. But there was this couple that would always come in and eat every Friday morning,
Mm-hmm.
right at 11 o'clock. It's the same couple, always come in, and I always worked that shift. And I would always see them, get, sat with a different server, and
Mm-hmm.
until eventually one day they got sat with me. And it ended up that that gentleman was a doctor or retired doctor,
Mm-hmm.
but he had a passion for photography. And we got through this conversation of photography. And so I was telling him, oh, I'm in this film class. And so he was like a huge fan of photography. He had even had a dark room in his house. So every Friday he would come and ask and come and sit with me. And so we would talk about how the class was going and all that. Fast forward the next semester, I'm about to take the digital photography class. I can't afford a camera. I'm over here like panicking, like, how am I going to have a camera to participate in this class? And so he invites me to come to his house. And I thought that was kind of random, It's kind of like, oh man, like, it's cool that, we talk, but I was like, you know what? He's a very nice guy. I was like, I'll go over. And he gives me his address, and I go over to his house, and he hands me this box. and it's this box with a Nikon D100, and it's one of the DSLRs that he used to use when he was first learning photography. And I still have that camera
Wow.
until this day. It's the camera that means the most to me. But that was the first camera where I learned digital photography, aperture, shutter speed.
Hmm.
And man, the viewfinder was so small, or the back of the camera, the
Yeah.
back of the camera was so small. It was like 10 megapixels. But I love that camera. But it just taught me how to be humble. And so I've been teaching for the past 11 years, and a lot of my old equipment I give away to my students. So I had
Hmm.
an A6600. I have a student that wants to pursue photography in college.
Hmm.
Obviously, she doesn't have enough money to take pictures. I ended up upgrading to the A6600, and I gave her my old A6500. And I was like, I just gave it to her. I was like, here, I want you to have this camera. I don't want you to have an excuse of like, hey, I can't take pictures or whatever. So I was like, this is your camera. You can keep it. And so right now she's a senior, and she's doing yearbook photos. She's the top editor. She's the one that's in control of the yearbook. And so she
Hmm.
has that camera with her all the time. And so that camera, so going back to the story, is had that gentleman not giving me that camera, I
Hmm.
don't know if I would have been,
Where you are.
into, yeah, where I am right now. And so a lot of my equipment I'll end up giving away to my students, and kind of just keeping that tradition, sparking the next, Eli Infante. Who knows what's going to happen to my student, a year or two from now. Will she, outdo me? I always get mad at her. I was like, you better not outdo me, okay? All the stuff I'm teaching you, you can't be better than me. I just mess with her. I just messed with her, but yeah. So that would be one of the stories that's kind of stuck with me, is
Wow.
just passing on the generosity and the humbleness from the doctor that gave me my first camera.
But it's amazing that you not only, kind of experience this, but also you just try and do the same thing, which is, I think,
Mm-hmm.
amazing. And I also think, and I don't want to go into like pandemic and all this stuff, but I deeply believe that photography for many, many people these days is some kind of like a, how I can describe this. They can release the stress. Is like something which really helps them with the mental states. I just want to
Yes.
share one story with you very briefly. I had
Mm-hmm.
some workshops, before the, even though it was before pandemic, and I had a
Mm-hmm.
one gentleman who told me that he's a CEO in one of the biggest corporations in the United States, and he's so stressed, he's so like he's got a depression. There's always this pressure in work, so he
Mm-hmm.
kind of started basically taking photograph of his friends, and then because that gave him this kind of release of this depression. And also he told me, when you photograph something or someone, you kind of have to get in completely different relationship with your subject, right? And that's what makes him
Okay.
kind of having believing back in people, because in the corporate world it's always like cutthroat, everyone is an enemy, you have to just kind of look
Yes.
after yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why he wanted to do photography, because it was for him like a therapeutic kind of like a
Yes.
release of all the stress. So what you're
Yes.
doing with giving event to students, and then I work also with a lot of young people, and amount of depression and amount of pressure they're getting, it's just crazy. And I think photography could be some kind of like, as I said, like a therapeutic, even like a therapy for some of
Mm-hmm.
them, to kind of get them out of
Absolutely.
this states. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so kind of speaking of that, so kind of let's kind of, I'm gonna kind of dive a little bit deeper into your education, and
Mm-hmm.
so if you could just explain to me, and then just kind of share a little bit. So like, I know you're a teacher and you've been doing this for a living, but also you not only teach, let's say, at school, but you pushing a lot of knowledge to the world, right? And because we're living in the world where there's no borders, especially online, I found we can reach thousands and thousands of people, and we can take like all this entire
Mm-hmm.
industry to the next level because everyone has access to it, right? So what makes you decide, and to share your knowledge? And we have, as I said, a little bit of conversation prior, that 10 years or even 15 years ago, you know to
Mm-hmm.
even get anybody to tell you anything was literally
Yes.
impossible, right? And people were very
Mm-hmm.
protective of their work. They were really like, what, I'm not going to share anything. You have to not even pay for this, but they wouldn't even consider that for most part. So what was your kind of like a transition and saying, because it seems like based on your YouTube videos and everything what I'm following, like you have no
Mhm.
limits when it comes, oh, I'm going to tell you just this much and then I'm not going to tell you more. It seems like you're just full on, and okay, this is what I've done, this is how I got it, this is all the steps, this is all the information, and you have literally no any kind of like boundaries with sharing your knowledge. So how did you even got to this? If you could just kind of tell me a little bit.
So it kind of, I think it started around 2 or 3 years ago. I was watching a video by Peter McKinnon, and this is before Peter McKinnon on YouTube blew up.
Mm-hmm.
This is when I think he had like 100,000 subscribers. But somebody had asked him the same question. It's like, Peter, why are you just giving away so much of this content away for free?
Mm-hmm.
And he said something that I'll never forget. And basically, what he said is that if he doesn't make this content, somebody else will.
Mm-hmm.
So why am I going to hold all of this secret content? Somebody else on YouTube is going to end up making that video. So why am I going to just hide all this content? You know, nowadays, everything with TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, everybody's sharing all of this free content. And even if I share this free content, it's not like people are going to, their work's going to look exactly like mine.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different factors that go into the final outcome of the photograph, the styling, the makeup, the background choice. There's so many different variables that go into it that even though I share the exact formula and the recipe, it's not going to look like mine either way, you know?
Yeah.
So I have no problem sharing with, you know, any of my process. And I've been doing that for the past 11 years anyways. It's like if my student comes and asks me a question on how I'm capturing a photograph, I'm not going to tell my student, hey, I'm not going to help you. Sorry, you have to figure it out on your own. You know, like, come on. You know, so I'm kind of just used to always helping regardless, you know? And so, yeah.
Well, I think it's amazing that we kind of got to this point, right? Because I think, and then also like I see what is amazing, and then I want to add what you just have said, that you know I might take your recipe, add something kind of from my kind of like bucket, and create something new.
Exactly.
And so it seems like this knowledge is not only shared, but it's like we all constantly improving some of those things,
Exactly.
right? And we can reach
exactly.
much quicker to kind of different level of photography, because you don't have to be stuck at something, and then like, okay, I don't know how to do it, I need to, let's say, 6 months to figure this whole thing out. You can have the recipe, and now, okay, I'm going to add something mine and create. So I think and I deeply believe, and I always say this to all the students what I'm teaching, that they're living in an amazing world where
Yes.
pretty much everything is accessible for free. Like, you don't have to go to photography schools, you don't have to buy some super expensive courses. You have to just a little bit of time dig into the YouTube or any other platforms, and then you can find pretty much anything. So I think that's well, amazing times those kids can really kind of tap into those things. Okay, so you have said about Peter McKinnon and on social media. So I want to just tap into this for a second, because it seems like the social media nowadays is a big part of our life and big part of our photography, and that's how we spread like our work, we spread our knowledge. It gives us the access to pretty much the entire world, and to millions and millions of people. So could you tell me what's, in your opinion, pros and cons of social media? And I'd like to kind of explore this, because I'm sure there's some positive stuff what I have said, but there's also a lot of negative stuff which are happening constantly. So what's your take on this?
So the positives of social media is that you can grow your following and help out people all across the world. I just did a summer workshop last summer, and most of the people in all of the cities sold out. Most of the people found out about me because of YouTube and social media. Without social media, how am I going to go to New York and then have a following so that people can attend, or go to Dallas, or go to Chicago or Los Angeles? So I think it's a fantastic way to help people all across the world, but also just network. I mean, I've had so many opportunities to do presentations for photo conventions with Westcott, and there's just so many opportunities with social media. Now, the downside to social media is, and I've just been thinking about this lately, is that you can waste a lot of time on social media just scrolling
Mm-hmm.
and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, especially on YouTube, because I found myself on YouTube a lot, watching videos, thinking that I was learning a lot of content. But I just had this conversation with my friend Marco, is that you can watch a bunch of videos. You can sit there all day and watch
Mm-hmm.
videos and think like you're learning stuff. It's not until you get off your butt and
Yeah.
actually practice it. Because I learn more, the way my brain works is that it'll process more if I'm actually practicing it and actually making those mistakes. Because if you're watching a bunch of videos and you're not applying that knowledge, you
Mm-hmm.
really didn't learn anything.
Yes.
You're just thinking you learned something.
Yeah.
Now, another downside of social media is you can get into this consumption mode where you're just consuming a bunch of content on Instagram or YouTube, and it might have a negative effect, and you start comparing yourself to other people's work and then worried about the social media likes and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So I find myself trying to not be on social media as much. Sometimes I feel bad because I have a lot of people comment on my Instagram photos, and I tell my friend Mark all the time, I was like, dude, I feel bad because I post the photo, they always comment, but then having to reply to everybody,
Yeah.
and like you were
That's
saying
time
earlier,
consuming.
I'm very, yeah, it's time consuming, and I'm very busy. I have a full time job. I have my girlfriend I got to make time for, my family, and then plus trying to make time to make YouTube content and trying to keep up with everything. It's a lot of work, and so mental health wise, sometimes it's good to just take a break from
Mm-hmm.
social media. You kind of have to schedule certain time for
Mm-hmm.
social media, and that's the way I do it.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to reply to comments, from YouTube or Instagram, I usually allot like maybe 10 minutes. Put a timer, 10 minutes, boom, 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 try to get through as many comments as I
Mm-hmm.
can, boom, 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 boom. And then after that, that's it, done.
Mm-hmm.
And then got to move on to what else I got to get done. Because if
Mm-hmm.
not, I'll be on there for like 2 or 3 hours and I've just wasted a bunch of time.
Yeah. Well, I think finding balance is the hardest part. I 100%
Mm-hmm.
agree because, and
Absolutely.
from one hand, you feel guilty, like, oh, I didn't respond to this person, right? And you just like, okay, this
Mm-hmm.
might be some, I don't know, important thing. And yeah, I think being a photographer 24 hours days is like the fraction what we really need, right?
Mm-hmm.
On the top of that, what I really agree with you that what you have said, and I just want to repeat this because I think this is really extremely point that just watching and learning from social media is the one thing, but nothing's going to replace practicing, right? Like I think there's this
Exactly.
quote, right? Like if you get the new camera, you have to put it in work to just see what really you can do with it, right? If you just buy a new
Exactly.
camera, it's going to just make you a guy with new camera. That's it. There's no more on
Exactly.
the top of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk
Exactly.
about. Well, I don't want to dive in too much into it, about some other negative stuff. Like I want to talk a little bit about how you're dealing with, the hate speech and stuff like that. I don't want to just go too much about it, but so I'm running this my group
Mm-hmm.
on Facebook, and I have I don't want to say hard time, but it seems there is so much negativity, right,
Mm-hmm.
amongst people, and it's for me also seems like there is a lot of people who don't know how to I don't know, just give someone constructive criticism about certain photos because we are all on the same. Well, we all I think at different levels, right? And I don't believe
Mm-hmm.
that someone is doing photographs, just to get the bad results. They're trying to do their best. They try to showcase and they try to get some feedback. But it seems like I found a lot of these people they just jump on the person and try to like take you down, like you shouldn't you shouldn't skip this whole thing, you
Yes.
shouldn't so how you deal with this stuff, because I'm guessing you have also really big social media, and I'm sure there's
Mm-hmm.
some fights and some situations where
Oh
it getting
yeah.
out of control.
I have a YouTube channel, so I know
Okay.
how crazy people on YouTube can be. I remember one time somebody said I move my hands too much in the video,
Oh my
that I
god.
should staple my hands to the table.
Okay.
And so honestly, when it comes to like hate comments, whether it's on Instagram or YouTube, my my thing is either just immediately block them. I never acknowledge them. I think that's the worst thing that you can
Hmm.
do. I see a lot of people will screenshot what somebody said and then they'll put it on their stories and say like, oh, look at what this person did to me. And like, you're just giving them the attention that they wanted.
Yeah.
Just immediately just block them and delete the comment. I don't acknowledge them at all. The same thing on Instagram. If I get any kind of negative feedback, I immediately just delete it. And it's what I tell my students all the time with this whole, like you said, this hate speech and this cyberbullying now with social media. I tell them all the time, don't ever acknowledge them, immediately block them. I don't got time for that on social media. So that's the way I approach it.
Okay.
Is doing that, man.
Yeah.
Because it's I haven't had something too bad lately.
Okay.
But they'll pop in every once in a while. And I know what you're talking about with the Facebook groups. There's always these photographers that, they're new into photography, and then you have these photographers that, maybe think they know it all, and then they start bashing like a beginner who's, just simply just trying, and they're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And they just completely attack them. And I think that's one of the things that I don't like about the photography industry is that kind of those kind of remarks, or just bashing other photography companies too. I think sometimes people use like a certain brand, whether it's lighting or a camera, and they just immediately bash that camera or bash that lighting company or whatever it is, and it's just kind of like I don't understand it. I really don't.
Yeah. Well, I think it's just people sometimes have a miserable lives, right? And they try to find something or someone to just dump all this, kind of own frustration, I think. But I 100% agree with you what you have said, that, and I do this the same. If I see someone kind of starting going after me and trying to kind of, I think it's a different story when someone critiques you because, they certain things would be improved, whatever, in their opinion. But they never have done something like this, so it's kind of hard to say for them, okay, this is possible or whatever, right? But if someone's just like, oh, this is kind of going straight to the bottom and try to shoot you down without any argument, just they hate you or what you do, that's completely a different story. And I think these people shouldn't be blocked automatically without even having a discussion. Okay, so let's move on and tell me, what is your ultimate goal with your career, your photography? Like, what's you, let's say, in 10 years? Where you want to be with what you do?
Oh man, that's a fantastic question. 10 years from now, I definitely want to progress more in my studio work. I just had this conversation yesterday with my friend Marco. We were having lunch together, and I was telling him how much we've grown in our studio work within just the past year, starting from like, man, I'm telling you, if we look at my old work at studio, it was just like, it was pretty funny. And now I'm slowly finding my style. And I think that with my photography in the 10 years from now, I really want to have like this bold look that not every photographer can achieve. Because if you look at somebody like Lindsay Adler, there's like a certain attention to detail that the top photographers have. It might be the styling, it might be the makeup or the hair, but there's always this certain quality that they have that's what I'm slowly trying to get towards, is get that bold look that not every person can get. Because I think we talked about this earlier with the high-speed sync look outdoors, is that I think that's what a lot of people, that's the easy thing to do. Everybody can do that. But I'm trying to find an avenue in a way where, okay, what can I do with my work so that it can stand out? And that when people look at it, they're like, wow, there's a lot of attention to detail in that work. And I think that's the emphasis that I've been placing in my work lately, is where is the wow factor in that final shot? You can't always achieve it all the time. I wish I could.
Well, it's like a viral content, right? You're trying your best, and at some point you kind of hit this jackpot, right? But it takes practice and time to get there.
It's hard to pay attention to all those details because, as a full-time teacher, I don't have a lot of time to really plan out my shoots as much as I would want, or at least not all the time. I have a couple of photo shoots I'm super excited for. There's one I've been working on for a couple of months. We have this cool wardrobe. And I have another one that's kind of with this retro car that I've been planning out. But, but if I had more time, oh man, I would love to just really just put a little bit more effort into the final details. And another thing, 10 years from now, I would love to be just doing more photo workshops, traveling more. This year, I've been really bummed because I've been asked to do a lot of presentations all across the United States that I've had to decline, unfortunately. just due to mental health, like I have to make time for my full-time job, my family, my
Mhm.
girlfriend. And as much as I want to be able to travel and do all of these photo conventions, I've had to say no to a lot of them,
Mhm.
unfortunately. So hopefully 10 years from now, who knows? Maybe I'll be full-time photographer. I haven't decided if, maybe I stop teaching and I go full-time photography.
Mhm.
So 10 years from now, who knows? If I'm making enough money, who knows?
You
And
can
that'll
know,
open
yeah,
up the door to be able to travel more and
absolutely.
be able to create more content. So
But it's
we'll
also
see.
cool that you
We'll see
have
what
this
happens.
whole kind of foundation of teaching, right? You can just transition this not only to school, but also you can push it, directly to photographers. So you know
Absolutely.
how to really kind of convert this. So tell me a little bit
Hmm.
about, like, I'm gonna again switch the gears a little bit. I have a couple more
Hmm.
questions to you. Um, because you said about kind of all this balancing and stuff. I know this whole thing is kind of controversial, but I want to jump into this a little bit because this is one of the
Hmm.
most, I don't know, requested questions I've been receiving. How this whole pandemic impact your work, your business, and the way you look at photography? Because I know the last couple of years since this whole thing started, I don't know. I think each country, each region, every place is different. But
Hmm.
how you kind of like how you were dealing with this whole thing, how this whole thing changed what you do.
So for me, it actually worked out good for me because
Mm-hmm.
as a full-time teacher, I was just working from home.
Mm-hmm.
And when the pandemic started right after spring break, we never went back. At the end of March, April, and May. So I was working from home,
Okay.
and it actually opened up the doors for me through YouTube. I started
Mm-hmm.
making a lot of YouTube content. I couldn't go out and shoot, so I started making a lot of YouTube videos. I was making three, maybe four videos a month,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what kind of jump started my YouTube channel. And I
Okay.
started really just pumping out a lot of content. And it really just got me thinking much differently now that we couldn't really shoot. And I know it was almost like if I didn't have the YouTube stuff, I think I would have gone through like a photography depression. I know me and my
Mm-hmm.
friends were like, man, we haven't shot like in a month.
Yeah.
We don't have any new work and what's going on here. So for me, it actually and this story is probably going to be different for a lot of people. I was
Yeah.
talking to a photographer from Corpus Christi that's from my area, and he said that he lost a lot of money because his
Mm-hmm.
a lot of his clientele was from high school seniors
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of like the yearbook photos, and so
That's
it
gone.
hit
Yeah.
him really hard. But for me, because I had a full time job, I was very fortunate. Um, and like I said, it jump started a lot of my YouTube stuff, and it kind of
Mm-hmm.
showed me. I was like, man, if I had more time, I could really push out a lot more YouTube content.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay, so my final question to you
Hmm.
is, what would be your advice? I don't know, you can just come up with, I don't know, couple ones
Hmm.
for starting photographer, someone who, like, I want to be, and I know this is kind of trendy nowadays. Oh, I want to be a photographer. But you, as a educator and teacher, what would you say to someone like that who's starting off, and what kind of the first advice you would give it to them?
I would say work on your social skills. Learn how to network with people. I'm telling my senior that wants to be a photographer, learn the business skills as well. It's not so much. Yes, it's important to be able to be a great photographer and take good portraits, but also have good social skills to make people feel good at the photo shoot, so
Mm-hmm.
that they can refer you to other clientele. It's super important to make your clients happy
Mm-hmm.
or just the people around you. And like I said earlier, that in order for your work to evolve, like I've been very fortunate that my work's been able to evolve because I have friends that have been able to help me with getting the studio, or people like stylists that have been able
Mm-hmm.
to style some of my shoots. And there's a lot more that goes into photography outside of just getting great portraits.
Mm-hmm.
And like we were talking about earlier, spend a lot of time practicing and shooting. Don't get into consumption mode watching a lot of videos on YouTube. Yes, watch them. I'm not saying that they're not bad. Watch them, but make sure that you're watching them and then practicing and applying what you just watched. Because if you're not doing that, your growth is going to take a lot longer than if you are just watching stuff and sitting at home watching. So,
Absolutely. Okay, thank you, Eli, for this, I think, great interview, and thank you for your time. I'll tag all your, kind of YouTube channels and all of your social media so people can find you. I have to say that if you didn't check what you're doing, I think everyone should check it, because your work is truly amazing, and I think everyone should look into this. And if you want to learn something, I think they should check and follow your YouTube channel, because you, as you said, you're pumping a lot of amazing content, so people can learn from you, including myself. I have this ring bell turn on whenever your video is coming up, because I want to see what you're up to. So yeah, thank you again. I think at some point I would love to do this again.
Absolutely.
Because I think you have I think you have really huge impact on this industry, and I think I even for YouTube, I can see this amazing personality that it's just kind of like magnetic. That like someone who who say they don't like you, I don't think that they have to have their mental check or something to do, because it's pretty amazing. So thank you again. Thank you for your time, and we'll definitely keep in touch.
Yes. All right. Thank you for having me, man. It was a great time talking.
Thank you.